y'all, it's Grant Fletcher, and thanks for checking out another episode of the 69-minute Eargasm with the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner, except Joel isn't here, at least not yet. You see, we're doing something a little bit different here. If you were listening to our previous episode with Violent J from the Insane Clown Posse, then you know all about it. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, be sure you go back and do so because it is a fun one. Now, don't panic. If you love the interviews are not going anywhere. We're still going to be doing those. We're not scrapping the original format, but what we are doing is we're just going to be giving you, the Eargasm Army, a little bit more content out there. Where you see what happened was, back in 2019, Joel and I had a concept for a show called Extreme Championship Wednesday, in which we would take a look back at ECW of yesteryear and just sort of do a post-mortem on pay-per-views and different wrestlers' careers in ECW, as it were. But that show never came to fruition. So Joel and I decided, you know what? Why don't we just bring that show to the Eargasm Army? Why don't we do those on the 69-minute Eargasm whenever we don't have an interview? So that's what we did. We recorded a few episodes way back when, put them in the can, and we said, you know what, why don't we go ahead and just release those? Because we felt like they were really good. We felt like they were really fun. And you all would love to hear them. In fact, our next episode we're going to be dropping is going to be examining the ECW tenure of a man synonymous with the promotion, someone who worked in WWE, WCW, ECW, TNA, etc., etc. That's right. We're going to be talking about Raven next week. So if you're into that, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you are, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever it may be. But that said, I think we need to go ahead and get to this week's episode, one that Joel and I recorded back in September of 2019. We were examining probably the best ECW pay-per-view, in my opinion, the best ECW pay-per-view of all time, Heatwave 1998. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as Joel and I recap every single minute of the action from Heatwave 98.
What do we have on the docket today?
Oh man, we've got something really, really special on the docket for today, because today we're going to be covering Heatwave 1998, quite possibly one of the best ECW pay-per-views of all time, maybe even the best ECW pay-per-view of all time. Before you watch it back, Joel, where would you say this one ranked on your list?
I'd say you summed it up perfectly, because honestly, you know, whether it's just what I thought or what a lot of people that I've talked to about it have thought, or if you do go on the internet and just even jump on Google or whatever and kind of see different writings about it in different forums, and, you know, to see kind of the reception and how it was received and how it's aged and everything like that. What you've said is really the gist of it, is that it was one of the stalwart beacon flagship shows for ECW. It was the kind of show with matches, with a lineup, with star power that honestly you almost would be afraid to put on, because you'd be wondering, how can we show after show, pay-per-view after pay-per-view, think about continuing to top this? A show that might be effectively in its execution so good that it would almost put you in a kind of in a quandary, kind of put you in a pickle. But what you said is most so than anything that you'll find on the internet. And it's that the consensus is, I guess the debate is, was this ECW's best pay-per-view, or was it one of the best? That's really the only decision that's out there. 99 out of 100 people loved the show.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with us here. If you've never seen it before, or it's been a long time since you've seen it. It had been a long time since I had seen it. We rewatched it, you know, for this episode here. Man, you got to go back on your WWE network and check it out. ECW Heatwave 1998. You will be glad you did. But before we start covering the show, let's go ahead and talk about the background on that. Let's set the stage and cover the storylines leading into the pay-per-view. Joel, you ready?
Sure.
All right, simply put, very good. Let's cover the month of TV heading into the pay-per-view. We got the July 4th, 1998 edition of ECW Hardcore TV. It was taped at the ECW Arena just a few days before that. That one started out with Joey Styles introducing his new broadcast partner, the ECW Heavyweight Champion Shane Douglas. And the reason for Shane Douglas taking over as color commentary here is because he's out with an elbow injury. Joel, what do you remember about that elbow injury, and what were the concerns about that injury leading up to now?
I wouldn't be the best person to ask about logistically the elbow injury and everything about. I mean, I don't have details, so to speak, but I do know that around this time you've got Taz, who believes himself to be world champion and world championship caliber. And with Shane being out, you've got the storyline where Taz is the FTW champion. And it leaves Shane injured, sitting on the sidelines and at the pay-per-view doing color commentary with Joey Styles and, pointing to the real belt, his belt, and saying, listen, this belt's recognized all around the world. This is the ECW championship, and that's where we are. And that's what everybody's fighting for, you and everyone else. And of course, Shane's saying that, but as chicken shit heel, he's doing everything he can to duck Taz, even though he can't compete yet anyway. He is injured. But even as a non-competitor, even as an announcer, he's kind of calling out and obviously ducking Taz at the same time, to the point where, he's surrounded by his brethren in the triple threat. Big brother of all being Bam Bam Bigelow, who is the one doing battle with Taz, the FTW self-appointed champion, on this particular pay-per-view. And you can see when not too early for a spoiler, I don't know, but Bam Bam doesn't get through Taz, and it leaves Shane really, really hot and bothered. And again, he's not even medically cleared to compete yet, but just the notion of having to one day, the moment he's ready to return, get tested by the human suplex machine, Taz, obviously has him hot under the collar. So I don't remember much about, I was, Shane and I got along, but I don't know that I ever had, too much inside baseball on the injury itself. And as we went through kind of July, August, where the injury was and how it was actually progressing. But I do remember the storyline, though, with Taz with the FTW title, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, too, because there really isn't a lot of information out there on that elbow injury. If you look around online, there's not a ton to be said about that, so you really would have to get that information from him. And I'm glad you brought up the FTW Championship. I'm going to get to that in a minute here. But Shane Douglas comes out with Francine, and I mean, there's a lot we could say about Francine, I'm sure. And she's awesome, and I think we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. And then also coming out to the ring with him, we have the ECW Tag Team Champions Lance Storm and Chris Candido. And we have Bam Bam Bigelow, this being the complete triple threat faction out here. Douglas, he starts to cut a promo on Taz, and he calls Taz a pretender to the throne, and then out comes Taz with the FTW Championship, which that belt is actually an old ECW TV Championship belt that's been painted orange. What do you remember about this, how the FTW Championship came to be? And what was the thinking on that backstage?
The thinking backstage, to answer the second question first, probably varied depending on who it was that was doing the thinking, and with their thoughts about Taz, both personally and professionally, I'm sure, as anything else in life. I think it was effective and creatively from a storyline standpoint. I mean, look, with Shane out, it was necessary. But I mean, it was, it's always nice to have somebody at the top defending a belt. There was the ECW television title, of course. There were the tag team championships, but it's always nice to have somebody on top that can kind of be, the antithesis to what the champion is. And a lot of time that, in Ric Flair's day, you had Ric Flair, the brash, kind of cocky, nature boy doing what he would do. And then in whatever territory he was in, you'd have kind of a young baby face that was over with the crowd and just kind of maybe a simple country boy, or just kind of somebody who, it's as old as time itself. And I think, with Taz, he kind of got to be the antithesis to a Shane Douglas, because Shane would kind of boast and talk, and he would kind of put his mouth out there on the line. But a lot of the time, he wasn't able, one reason or another. It was up to, his friends and his henchmen to come in and help. Again, as old as time itself, just telling, the few different stories that there are to tell in life. But But yeah, so what did people think about Taz kind of being out there and having the FTW belt and having that run with it at the top and everything like that? I mean, Taz was already a top player with or without that FTW belt. And this was just a storyline, it was, I think, the right thing at the time. So I couldn't tell you what everybody thought about it, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed all that out. And it was a really creative way to still have a world championship match on a pay-per-view while your world heavyweight title is being held up by an injured champion. And it was a good way to keep the rivalry going between Shane and Taz, because you knew this was leading up to a match between the two of them. You didn't want to cool that down. You wanted to keep the storyline going. So it was really cool, and really just to kind of keep things going here. Taz comes out, and he challenges Bam Bam Bigelow to a match, but he orders that all of the cameras be shut off, saying the people at home didn't pay to see this, the people here did. So they go to a commercial as the match gets started. And when they come back, we see the announce position here. We see Joey Styles and Shane Douglas along with Francine there. And Douglas is claiming that Bam Bam beat Taz, all over the arena. What do you think about this whole idea to not show the fans at home and to kind of leave it up to them as to who won the match or what exactly happened?
I think that's fun. I think that's different. And I think that, the whole reason that I started watching, kept watching, and stuck with for my whole life professional wrestling is for that it's fun and that it's different. And you see things in wrestling that you don't get to see in any other genre, in any other niche, in any other type of programming across television. And I think the challenge, and every week their TV and their product, the challenge to stay different, to stay fun and unique and current, and doing stuff like definitely effective, because if the heel is on the sidelines, so he's not able to get in the ring and be in the arena, and he's not being able to do the one that's taking maybe their chance of winning the match. So if they're not able to be out there, taking away a dream, taking away from somebody like Taz the opportunity to win the heavyweight title, if they're not able to be out there and do things like that, instead of just having Shane be a guy that's a color commentator, that's going to be a great color commentator, and that's going to paint a great picture and tell a great story. I mean, we know that, but there's more that Shane can do. And that's, again, just like the FTW storyline itself, a device. The device here that's being used is the trope, if you want to call it one, is that Shane is playing takeaway, not physically him playing takeaway of Taz. Then what he's able to do is play takeaway and take something away from the viewer. And that's them being able to see with definition and with some finality, or at all, just being able to kind of watch the match and see what happens. So when Shane says, we're not going to show this, this wasn't part of you're not going to be able to see this. What they're effectively doing is having Shane be an agent of change, and that change is taking something away from the viewer that the viewer otherwise would want to see.
Yeah, no, and actually, I may have said something wrong there. I'm not sure, but it was actually Taz who ordered the cameras to be shut off. But I think that really kind of led itself to Taz's kind of really, badass kind of brawler, kind of Street Fighter sort of vibe that he had, though.
So then, so let's re-record, my part of it, and let's do this all again and just say that with Taz, the funny thing is that you've got this kind of tweener that, up until, with the exception of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and maybe as a throwback to the 80s, Dr. D. David Schultz, who never really got to live out to fruition on TV the role of being a tweener, the kind of heel that would hate a heel just as much as he hated. Taz was portrayed not so much as a heel, the way many other people in the company were. Certainly Shane Douglas, the epitome of a heel. But Taz was portrayed as just hating everyone. He hated every other wrestler on the roster because they were standing in his way. He hated life. He was miserable. He hated ECW. At any given moment, Taz was he was full of hate because he embodied the path of rage. He was just filled with rage. There was something within him and his character, whether it was something that ever got defined specifically or it wasn't, that made him the type of non-heel, non-babyface, but just the kind of almost like a tweener, like a Deathstroke the Terminator, like a real kind of just a guy who's out there for himself So when he goes ahead and plays takeaway and takes something away from the viewer that they otherwise wanted to see, I think that kind of helps establish him as, if they were afraid, if we were afraid that Taz were starting to get over as a babyface too much, and if the intention was that wasn't where Taz needed to be at the moment, then him taking away the ability to see this match from the fans, was a great and clever way for him to kind of prove that he's not a babyface at all.
Yeah, I like it. I think that sums about it up. Next up on this card in particular, in this episode, we've got Masato Tanaka coming over from FMW. What do you remember about this sort of partnership that ECW had with FMW over in Japan?
Yeah, it was a great partnership because FMW was hot at the time and was there were similarities between them on the Japanese scene and us here at home. We did have a great talent exchange, a great partnership with them. There were some kind of co-branded shows, some shows where ECW sent a lot of talent over to Japan. And it was good to have the arrangement, especially for shows like this, where you're loading it up. You've got a lot of great talent. You've got a lot of great matches. A lot of them intrinsically are ECW guys versus ECW guys, Americans versus Americans, maybe some Canadians thrown in the mix with Landstorm. But you've got that kind of thing going on with guys like Just Incredible, Jerry Lynn, Landstorm, Chris Candido. You've got all the top American guys. But now you're able to have a match, I don't want to say crack, but time-tested, a match like Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka, who had been going out there for at least a handful of years with each other in Japan, tearing it up. Mike Awesome, international wrestling living and career in Japan, independent of anything that he'd do here in the States. But he comes to ECW, and it's him and Masato Tanaka, who would grow to be an ECW homegrown superstar almost in his own right for how often and frequently he was used. And this was just one of the first exhibitions in mid-1998 of Awesome versus Tanaka and everything that they would have in store for Extreme Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, and I would imagine also really played up to the tape trader crowd as well. Really trying to capture that segment of fans' attention there.
Yeah, no doubt, without question. ECW was definitely well beloved amongst people who traded tapes and watched a whole lot of product, not just WWF and WCW, but people who followed the indies, people who followed everything that was going on in the United States and abroad, people who watched Japan, watched Mexico. And that was ECW's wheelhouse, was catering to fans who wanted to see the best wrestling, different wrestling, and more wrestling. And the partnership with FMW allowed us to bring in not just Awesome and not just Tanaka, but also other guys on the card. We'll get to it, I'm sure, match by match as we go up and down the pay-per-view card, but just a really, really, and with international varied talent, just a really, really solid show.
In this match here, we see Masato Tanaka beat Balls Mahoney via pinfall after hitting Balls with a tornado DDT. Well, couldn't get that out. Onto two chairs that were
easy for you to say, Grant Fletcher.
Yeah, that's right. And we're really seeing them at the very beginning of them building up this tornado DDT as a killer move. Next up, we see shots of Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley breaking the neck of Beulah McGillicuddy with a 3D. That happened in New Orleans about a month prior, just about an hour down the road from me. And that was really the end of Beulah in ECW. What do you remember about Beulah's exit from the company here?
Again, you take what you have and you say to yourself, how can we get the most effect for what it is that we need to do? And Beulah was being written off TV. She wasn't going to be appearing anymore. Instead of giving her a retirement show, instead of anything that would have looked just kind of run of the mill, cookie cutter, whatever, predictable, blasé, Beulah was sent out with a bang. And that's what you would expect. Nothing less from ECW in its treatment of a spectacular, in this case, an exit from the company of one of its most beloved top personalities. So I think it was really clever that her character exits TV because her neck is broken. And I mean, you know, the Dudleys it was a competition week to week, month to month, over time. It was a competition. How can the Dudleys keep beating their heat? How can they keep getting the most possible heat? How can they keep getting more heat this week than last week? Heat. The same way I said earlier, you're almost afraid to unleash a show like Heatwave 98 upon even your biggest fans. Because what if out of the next handful of pay-per-views, only at most a few are considered as good? It's built up to be that kind of show. The same way you think that about the show Heatwave, you think in the terms of a microcosm about the Dudleys element, you think, and this was always the thought process, how do we continue to get more and more heat and keep the heat that we have? And in this case, it was perfect. Taking out a beautiful girl like Beulah, again, its own form of playing takeaway, right? Now, not only is her neck's broken, so she's all that suffering then for Dreamer, but also you're taking away from the viewers who enjoy seeing her every week the opportunity to see her every week. Just a tremendous threshold of heat on the Dudleys for doing what they did.
You know, it really did serve to fan the flames of the heat on the Dudleys and really push this rivalry between Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman, of course, too, you know, even further. And Tommy Dreamer, man, you see the shots of him handcuffed to the rope, and he's selling it like $1 million here, isn't he?
Yeah. And he was great for that. I mean, Tommy, that's Tommy's bread and butter. You know what I mean? That's his wheelhouse, is just, you know, he was always kind of an underdog type or a sympathetic always kind of a white meat baby face in hardcore clothing, you know, always kind of in extreme clothing and in a way that fits the company and in a way where he had proven himself time and again to be tough, but yet kind of just on his, you know, tough exterior, but on his interior, just the kind of hero that was the heart, the soul, the spirit of ECW, you know, definitely extreme, definitely hardcore, but definitely a baby face, right? We were talking about Taz before, how they needed for him to be the type of character he was. And while Tommy could have a level of rage brought out of him, whether it's by Raven and all of that went on in that feud, whether it's something like this where Beulah gets her neck broke by the Dudleys, of course he could have that rage brought out of him, but it was always kind of this white fire, this white meat baby face kind of rage, the kind of rage that was, it's good that him and Taz were so different because it meant that there was never a redundancy. You would never look at something that was written for Taz, that Taz was out there doing, and say to himself, you know what, this would be better for Dreamer though right now, and vice versa. Taz would make a terrible Tommy Dreamer, and Tommy Dreamer would make a terrible Taz. But playing to their strengths and in of who they were, yeah, man, that kind of stuff was perfect for Tommy.
Yeah, you know, we're talking about heat, though. Speaking of heat, we next cut to the Dudleys in the ring, and Joel Gertner is there to say that the Dudley Boys are the best, most violent, and most respectful tag team in ECW. And being respectful, they've got a blow-up doll representing Beulah McGillicuddy with them, who you have dubbed Beulah McGillislutty.
Oh, and, you know what? Now, look, I was about to say, now, if she were representing... Now, this is my character speaking. If she were representing Beulah McGillicuddy, we would have called her Beulah McGillicuddy. She wasn't Beulah McGillicuddy. For the record, she was Beulah McGillislutty. Two different things.
I'm glad you cleared that up for us. I think, you know, maybe like 90% of our listeners probably would have known that, but there might have been 10% that needed you to clear that up, present company included, so I'm glad you laid that out there for us. But you order the timekeeper to ring out a 10-bell salute for the departed Beulah. And here's something I'm not clear on.
See how respectful we always were.
You were. Look, you were. I can't say that you weren't. You know, this is a perfect example. But I need you to clarify this for me. In storyline, was Beulah just injured so bad she couldn't show up again, or was she fucking dead?
in storyline, and I think best put at the pay-per-view itself. The way I said it at the pay-per-view itself was effectively this. I said that Bubba was the one who had done such damage to Beulah McGillicuddy, or something along those lines, that she didn't know whether to urinate, defecate, or ejaculate.
Okay. I see. I'm glad
is what I say at the pay-per-view.
Yeah, because like there's a lot of language from both, you and the Dudleys and from Tommy Dreamer leading up to the show and even on the show that could indicate either way, So that's why I just wanted you to go ahead and clear that up. Next up, we see Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman enter. Sandman's got a ladder. Tommy Dreamer has a 2x4 wrapped in barbed wire. They're set for a match against Bubba, Devon, and Big Dick Dudley. They have the numbers advantage, but they call out their mystery partner, who is Atsushi Onita, another FMW staple there. Actually, really staple is
FMW icon, top guy, legend. Yeah.
I was going to say staple doesn't even really sum it up, And Atsushi comes in, he's cleaning up house, but what's that?
Onita.
Oh,
that's me doing my Onita chant.
Sorry, I'm and the fans were chanting it. They were going crazy for it for sure. He's cleaning house against the Dudleys here, but in the confusion, he accidentally hits Sandman with a barbed wire 2x4. And whenever Tommy Dreamer confronts him, he turns on Tommy Dreamer as well and starts attacking Dreamer with that 2x4 as well. And then he just walks out.
He's Onita. He's a lunatic.
Yeah, he never even takes off his kimono.
He could have been paid by. He could have been paid by us. Yeah, I think at the time, the conversion between Dudleyville dollars and Japanese yen was very favorable. And whether it's just Atsushi Onita being a complete bark at the moon lunatic who doesn't like to be questioned, made a mistake, or is it the case of the Dudley boys and the quintessential stud muffin Joel Gertner got into the pocket of, I don't think it'll ever, I couldn't even tell you, and even if I could tell you, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't even be at liberty to discuss why it was that Onita went off the rails the way he did, but he sure did.
Yeah, I'm also glad that you let us know that Dudleyville did have its own currency. That's a very eye-opening revelation there. The baby faces are
not the only time in ECW. Hey, by the way, not the only time in ECW that there was people with their own currency off the United States dollar. Ah. There was also there was Confederate currency, if you'll remember, with Julio De Niro, Easy Money, right? So there was that going on. Little ECW trivia.
Yeah, we'll get to some Confederate stuff a little bit later on here in this episode as well. New Jack comes in to make the save, but he gets blindsided by Jack Victory, who hits him over the head with a guitar. So Spike Dudley then runs in to help out. He starts clearing house, but then Big Dick Dudley grabs him up, and he tosses him out of the ring through the table, which was ever present at ringside at ECW. At one point, Joey Styles says it's for the safety of the wrestlers, but, a lot of wrestlers went through that table. Bubba then covers Dreamer, and the ref refuses to make the count, so Jeff Jones, Extreme Official Jeff Jones, comes in, attacks the official, and makes a fast count, prompting Joel Gertner to declare the Dudleys the winner. Jeff Jones, later we see him as Judge Jeff Jones. What was the thinking behind the Dudleys having their own referee?
What size cafeteria or other kind of room, banquet hall, do you think could be made if ECW hadn't existed? From every single table and every single chair that saw its demise come at the hands of Extreme Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, I don't think...
do you think there would be a cast of almost half the world itself? Like if you'd like to teach the world to sing and to scream EC dub and he's hardcore, and if you wanted to put all of those people that you were teaching in that half of the world, don't you think, I sometimes think, all of the tables and all of the chairs, how many Home Depot locations or how many Lowe's locations would it take to fill with all those tables and chairs? Yeah, we had our own referee. So what? We had our own referee. We needed, look, we were so hated, we were never going to get a fair shake in ECW. If you watch Heatwave 98, you'll see Joey Styles right as he's pitching to the main event and to us coming out through the curtain. And he, who was always a voice of reason, always order among chaos, even he says that he doesn't want to even watch the match. He hates the Dudleys. We make him sick to his stomach. We were never going to get a fair shake in ECW. So, of course, we had our own referee. Maybe we bought him. Maybe we bought Atsushi Onita. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this in character. Maybe.
No, I think you should.
Maybe.
I think it definitely adds something to
Maybe.
it. Next up on this same card, Chris Candido and Lance Storm defend the ECW World Tag Team titles against RVD and Sabu. They're, of course, being accompanied by Bill Alfonso. RVD, it should be mentioned here, is still the ECW TV champion as well. And Sabu and RVD win the titles. And after that, we see Sabu and RVD tussle over the TV title as they celebrate with the tag titles there. I wouldn't say that this is really hinting at some dissent between the two. It's more or less just kind of playing up on the general uneasy relationship that they had, the whole time that they were together as a unit. And it should be mentioned, too, that during this match, Chris Candido almost gets his fucking ear torn off by Rolling Thunder as well. What do you remember about their pairing, RVD and Sabu?
I thought it was cool. I thought, I know you're talking about how this in particular didn't necessarily play to the dissent between them amongst them, but there was that. And I thought that was, talking about different things like being different and being clever, keeping it interesting and new. I thought that level of having tag team champions that almost didn't even get along with each other, especially when they came up together in the business in Michigan, especially when one of them pretty much trained the other one, especially when the one that was the student out of the two is the one that arguably is getting even hotter buzz at the time. And if that's not the case, certainly is living his wrestling life and playing up his character like the one who is getting the most of the buzz of the time. I mean, for me, I thought it was really, really clever, the relationship between RVD and Sabu. And it's a treatise again upon how ECW wasn't so much about baby faces and heels, white and black, the guys who come out the north entrance versus the guys who come out the south entrance of the building. It wasn't that white hat, black hat, easy to digest symbolism. It was, this man is who this man is. And with the 5 minutes that we have every week out of the 60 minutes total that we have, we are going to use the brush that paints individually and in particular to show you who in particular and individually this man is. And they did that with Sabu. They did that RVD should like is Sabu. He loves to rib him. The one guy that should be proudest of in the company, RVD, because he brought him along, and RVD's a cockbag, and he can't tolerate RVD gnawing at him. It's just stuff like that, along with Taz, own shades of gray and a tweener. It gives you this it's why ECW had realism, even more so than Attitude Era WWF or Nitro Era, Bischoff Era, Russo Era WCW. It's because they weren't presented as babyface or heel 12 out of 24. They were presented themselves, and you would either pay your money to love or hate them, or whatever emotion that it is that you had for that character. You would have that because they were a babyface or a heel, or for who they were fighting that week or next week, but you would have it for that person and their character, warts and all.
Yeah, and I'm glad you really brought that up, too, because ECW only had an hour of TV to work with and really, 40, 45 minutes of TV with commercials to work with every week versus other major companies that might have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even more hours to work with every week, depending on which company
I'm glad you brought that up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's very important. Sure, I think it's very important. Raw is 3 hours. SmackDown is 2 with during main event or any of the other NXT, okay. But just counting the A and B show, it's 5 hours a week, which is a testament to everything that pro wrestling is and another reason why I love it. Nitro and Thunder back in the day. 3 hours and 2 hours. So WCW had 5 hours to play with each week. We had 1 hour before TNN. We only had ECW Hardcore TV. And our stuff was so over. WWF and WCW were on multiple hours a week, a handful of hours a week. There were certain markets, like your own, where, if I remember correctly, at one time at our peak, we had 2 different clearances. We had 2 different, one of them might have been small enough that it was along the line. It wasn't quite public access, I don't think, but I forget all of the details. But New Orleans, which I think was a peak town as far as number of hours that we were on in one town, we had 2 different clearances, different channels that we were on. One of them aired us and aired us again later in the same week on a replay. So we were on 2 hours on one station and our 1 hour on another station. So we were on 3 hours a week in New Orleans, but it was the same hour. That's how hot the business was, but that's also a testament to how hot we were. Now that that's taken care of, what I've digressed from is the point that you were making, which is, sometimes there's 5 hours every week to play with where you can get your whole roster over. Our roster was not necessarily so much. It was smaller maybe than WCW. But our roster was not so egregiously much smaller than the WWF's in number. We had all of our top guys that needed to get over, all of our mid-card guys. We had a number of talents. You're not counting them bing, 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 bing individually, but we had pretty much a few dozen guys that needed to get over. And when you take commercials out of our hour, we had 44 minutes to get them over. And that's going to be Joey doing stand-ups and talking. That's going to be, you've got your Dick Dale, Miserlou, Pulp Fiction montage. That's, you know what I mean? That's going to be your billboards showing what the card is for. So it's not all in ring. It's not all wrestler 1 and then wrestler 2 and then wrestler 3. A lot of that 44 minutes isn't that. And we've got this 1 hour program to get everybody over and get them over distinctly and uniquely, right? Because like we mentioned, we weren't using these cookie cutter formulaic. Look, I love the WWF. It's what I grew up on. Love it till the cows come home. But if you watch some of the stuff that's quote unquote before my time, if you jump on the network and you watch like mid to late 70s WWF, comparatively to today and to some of the stuff that's come down the pike since then, it is arguably, and some of the greatest minds in wrestling will say this about Vince McMahon Sr., it is arguably a bit formulaic because the business was built upon a certain business model. There was no pay-per-view. It was about getting people to go to the house shows. So it was about setting up a heel challenger for the babyface champion. And it was kind of formulaic. So there were only 2 hours a week back. There was an A show and a B show in the mid to late 70s, 1 hour each. So there wasn't 5 hours a week. There was 2 hours a week. But it was formulaic, good, bad, or otherwise. With us, we were breaking the mold. We were thinking outside the box. We weren't just creating things that were parallels to stuff that other territories that came before us had done, just doing it with different color, with different people. We were trying to create our own new product and go down avenues and take journeys that wrestling really hadn't been on before. And to do that before ECW on TNN with 1 hour of television every week was a testament to Paul Heyman and everybody else on the roster who pitched in and gave creative input.
Yeah, I mean, really just to illustrate a little bit further how over ECW was with that 45 minutes, and like you said, it was big in my market, the market here closer to New Orleans, is, 12, 13, 14-year-old me had no problem finding ECW on TV. I watched it as often as I could, but on basic cable, we didn't get UPN down here, which meant that I couldn't watch SmackDown. So I couldn't see WWF SmackDown, but I could see ECW.
Which is probably part of the reason why the next pay-per-view after Heat Wave 98 was November to Remember 98 from the UNO Lakefront Arena. Kind of loyalty, that kind of halo effect.
Yeah, also
And our
probably
3 hours of TV every week. That was really the same 1 hour over and over again.
Yeah, and probably held the ECW record for most shirtless fans in attendance as well. Seems like at those shows, people just took their shirt.
It might have been as hot. Yeah, it might have. Well, I mean, listen, man. Congratulations to you guys that, like, day after Halloween, and you guys tried to really hang in there with Dayton for hot buildings, man. But yeah, man. Dude, Louisiana is a tough one. I remember I did a show at the Joe Brown Arena or Civic Center, Joe Brown Center. And, everybody's trying to talk to Paul and get paid and everything that's going on after the show is going on. And it's like 2:00 before you're leaving the building, even though the show's over at like 10:45, 11, right? If you're lucky, it's 2:00. Maybe it was 2:30. So it's pitch black outside. Why? Because it's the middle of the night, right? Chronologically, it's pitch black outside. Inside the building that had probably no air conditioning, it is, 90 degrees. You see it's pitch black outside. I'm a city kid, and I'm from up here. I'm from the Northeast. So I am thinking, I'm just wired. Number one, it's 90 in the building. That's unusual. So I know that it's pitch black outside, and it's 2:30. So my mind is telling me, I'm going to open this door now that it is time to leave, and I'm going to get a breeze and a breather and a breath of fresh air and just a little blast of wind, and it's going to be cool. Finally, for the first time in hours. Dude, I opened up the door to go outside. What if I told you it was hotter outside the building than it was inside? And this was like late May. It was around like Memorial Day, I think. And it was so hot outside the building at 2:30 in the morning that it smacked you in the face.
Yeah, welcome to Louisiana. Yeah, man. All right, well, let's continue here. So the next episode of Hardcore TV takes place it airs on July 11th, 1998. And we see a quick recap of RVD and Sabu win the World Tag Team titles. And then we cut to a promo with Bill Alfonso along with RVD and Sabu. RVD comments that, or sorry, not Sabu, because RVD comments that Sabu is missing. But he says he's willing to carry Sabu in a promo just like he carries Sabu in the ring. And then he holds all 3 belts up and says that he deserves a push. And, well, you know how that plays out. Next, we cut to Joey Styles in the ring, who declares that this is the biggest crowd that ECW has ever had in New York City. We are in New York here. I should have mentioned that. Then Shane Douglas comes in, calls out Taz again. Taz promptly shows up, and the triple threat enters behind him to back up Douglas. Then Lance Storm sets up to take on Taz. Taz slaps him in the face, and that leads to a match between the two. Taz ends up tapping out Lance Storm here with the Taz mission. And then we cut back to the announce position. Shane Douglas claims that Bam Bam Bigelow will put Taz through the ring again, just like he had done back at Living Dangerously in March. And we're going to cover that pay-per-view in great detail, but man, that was an iconic moment there. Taz is on Bam Bam Bigelow's back. Bam Bam falls backwards. They both go through the ring. They climb out. Bam Bam Bigelow pins Taz and wins the ECW TV title. And then RVD beat Bam Bam for that a little bit later on, so it removed the title from the storyline. But still, man, iconic moment in ECW history, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Next up, we've got Mike Awesome coming over to take on... Yeah, he's coming back here, rather, from FMW to take on Masato Tanaka. The two of them have been feuding for a while over in Japan. I've got to imagine, man, Paul Heyman was chomping at the bit to introduce the American fans to this feud.
Absolutely. We had so much success with the Mexican wrestlers, with the luchadors in late 95, bringing lucha to America. So much success, as a matter of fact, that it paid off. And all those guys, I guess, got better offers, went to greener pastures with WCW, and it helped establish their lucha vibe and their cruiserweight division and everything like that. And I think, trying to be able to catch lightning in a bottle, because Paul realizing, of course, that all of the same people that are watching these tapes of AAA and CMLL, they're also watching tapes of All Japan and New Japan. So, and FMW, of course, and everything else that's out in Japan. So, yeah, man, why not give it a try and have this international talent come in? It helps establish us not just as a nationwide brand, a national product, but a global product. It was very important for us that our title be recognized as a true world heavyweight title, which all of them were because they got defended in Japan and elsewhere.
Yeah, this match ends up being really snug, really physical. Masato Tanaka picks up the pin with a roaring elbow. After the match, Mike Awesome attacks Tanaka, and he awesome bombs Tanaka out of the ring and through that table that was at ringside once again, and storming off, and Tanaka has to be helped to the back there. Oh, man, going back and seeing Masato Tanaka take an awesome bomb through a table to the concrete. Watching this in 2019, what's going through your mind?
Oh, watching it whenever, man. Yeah, these guys just took an amazing amount of brutality. They just were well aware that their bodies were seasoned for it. I'm sure it's not the kind of thing that either man did, on his third day of wrestling school. But it was what brought these guys to the dance. It was what got these guys over in Japan. These guys trusted each other and they worked so well together. And yeah, man, that's where their money was made in ECW, was these guys just going above and beyond and beating the living hell out of each other.
Yeah, next we see a pre-tape match from the ECW arena between, it's a handicap match, the Equalizer, who'd later become known as the Broad Street Bully, and Ulf Herman, who would later join up with the F.B.I. They're both being represented by Mr. Right here, versus Spike Dudley. And the bell rings. Spike Dudley pretty much immediately hits Ulf Herman with an acid drop. He gets the pinfall. And then he takes out the Equalizer and Mr. Right before just making his speedy exit there. We're really seeing Spike Dudley being built up as, a legitimate threat, even though he is so undersized and he's, the runt of the Dudleys, as they say. Next, we cut to the Dudleys in the ring, and Bubba Ray announces that this week, it's the Dudleys that have a surprise partner, and he's perhaps the most hardcore man that ever lived. We hear Terry Funk's music play, the fans go nuts, and then it cuts off, and Bubba Ray yells, "Psych," and he calls all the fans stupid marks and says that the Dudley boys don't need anybody. What do you think of Bubba Ray Dudley using the term mark on air here?
Yeah, that could be a first. That was not the kind of thing that you heard every week. And it was, I think the Dudleys were smart to play upon people's sensitivities in being called marks or smarks or internet marks. Or I think at the time, the internet was kind of in its infancy. It was in kind of its first handful of years or so of being around. And yeah, the fans prided themselves, ECW fans prided themselves on being wrestling smarter than, on average, the fans of other promotions, other territory, that kind of thing. And for Bubba to try to take that away from them or cast aspersion or make it a derogatory reference is the same as, what's happening, in view at that moment of him promising Terry Funk and then taking it away. It's, we talked about it earlier in this episode, it's like coming full circle, but it's takeaway. You know what I mean? We did that quite a bit in ECW. Our heels weren't just heels because they beat up baby faces. Our heels weren't just heels because they, it wasn't simplified and it wasn't simplistic. It wasn't, the reason, in many cases, our heels were heels is because ECW bent over backwards to give to the fans. So the heels in ECW are the ones who are trying to take away, from the fans, or take away what's being given to the fans, or any variation.
Yeah, and here right after that, we see John Cronus and New Jack hit the ring for their match against the Dudleys, and chaos ensues immediately. Jack Victory tries to sneak up on New Jack from behind again, but this time New Jack has his number, and he responds by hitting Jack Victory over the head with a guitar of his own. Still, the Dudleys have the numbers advantage, and that catches up to New Jack and Cronus, so Tommy Dreamer and Spike Dudley run in to make the save. As that action continues, though, Taz shows up at the announce position to confront Shane Douglas, and then Bam Bam Bigelow runs in to attack Taz. The fight rages on both in the ring and at the announce position. And as the show goes off the air, we don't really see a conclusion to either one of those. We do see Tommy Dreamer, though, standing tall in the ring with arms outstretched as we fade to black. So, we get that nice feel-good moment as we go off the air, but we don't really see a conclusion. Moving on to the July 18th edition of Hardcore TV. The episodes open up by showing Bam Bam Bigelow laying in wait for Taz at the announce position. He's acting as a bodyguard for Shane Douglas here. Douglas tells him to relax. He says Taz isn't there and he won't be showing up that week. Then we cut to a match between Blue Meanie and Supernova, set for action against Chris Candido and Lance Storm. It should be noted here, this isn't the full BWO. Stevie Richards is not with the company at this point in time. He had left WCW in 1997, worked a little bit for ECW, mostly was an independent guy. By the way, I saw Stevie Richards just last weekend. Man, he's still legit, man. He's still in great shape. That's no secret, though. It's no secret. It's no surprise.
Better than ever, man. Stevie's in tremendous shape and aging really well, taking great care of himself. He's in the fitness business. And just, kudos. I mean, he's really one of the guys in ECW that has made it and is doing really, really well and living his best life. Yeah,
man. Going back to the action here, before the match starts, Lance Storm refuses to wrestle the match, and he sits in a chair at ringside saying that, his opponents don't deserve to face him, the fans don't get to see it, so he's just sitting in a chair at ringside, leaving Chris Candido to fend for himself. Meanie and Nova, they have the numbers advantage. That starts to catch up to Candido. The referee takes a bump at one point. Lance Storm hits Meanie over the head with a chair from the apron, allowing Candido to get the win. And then Storm exits to the back, leaving Candido by himself again. We go to a pre-cut promo from RVD, Sabu, and Bill Alfonso announcing that their tag team title defense at the upcoming Heat Wave will be, since they are world tag team titles, that could be against opponents from anywhere in the world. Kind of a spoiler for the tag team championship rematch that's going to be coming up a little bit later, but we're going to go for it anyway. RVD concludes by saying if he were defending the TV title, then no one would want to see Sabu, inferring that RVD is doing Sabu a favor by defending the titles with him. Next up, we got New Jack cutting a promo from a subway car. I can't imagine that there would be any kind of a permit acquired there to film on a subway car.
Permit.
Yeah.
We don't need those thinking. You got New Jack. You got a permit? Yeah, New Jack has justifiable kills, man. This guy's had a handful of different guys in the trunk of his car before. You want a permit?
Yeah, it's always in the gorilla style,
probably not, right? I mean, I guess. Hey, who knows what the deal was on our music, right?
Yeah,
don't look to me for the inside track on that. I couldn't tell you what the deal was back then. A lot of the music is cut out on the network, so not a lot of fans will get to hear that anymore. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So you got to figure, right? Because, but some of those artists and some of those record labels, I'm sure were aware, and I'm sure you couldn't not be, and I'm sure they just, at worst or best, depending on how you measure, turned a blind eye, and at best or worst, depending on how you measure, were thrilled. Even if they weren't getting the BMI and ASCAP fees, they were thrilled because this music was, look, you've got Man in the Box on Dreamer. You've got Enter, and we know what sticklers Metallica are, but you've got Enter Sandman on Sandman. These songs are being used only with the utmost reverence, right? You've got so many songs on so many of our top baby faces that these songs are being heard, once or twice a week by fans who are really into the product. But dude, you know how many people these days are in their car driving and they hear Man in the Box, or they're in their car driving and Enter Sandman comes on, and instead of seeing a screen still from the music video, instead of thinking about the band, thinking about Metallica, you know how many people hear one of those ECW songs and the first thing they think about is ECW or the wrestler that song was for, or a moment when they were in the arena? It's mind-boggling. So I don't know if we were paying any BMI ASCAP fees, on that music, but I think at worst it was an on par relationship where we used the music and it helped our guys get over and it helped legitimize us, but it also, I think, did nothing to deter or detract from the songs or the artists that we were borrowing from. But did we have a permit to shoot on the New York City subway system? Probably absolutely not.
And that's what I was thinking too. New Jack says in the promo he's going to take Jack Victory to a new extreme, and take Jack Victory to another level of violence. He goes on to say that at Heatwave, Victory is going to become the victim of an original gangster. Who would have been on the crew they're recording this? I mean, is this just a cameraman and New Jack, or is there someone there with a light, or what's the deal there?
Many people possible, probably. New Jack, Paul probably might have been there. One or both of our camera guys, Ron and Charlie. I mean, nothing, just as kind of minimal as it would need to be and under the radar as it would need to be. They did, maybe somewhere around 5, maybe a few more than that, of these kind of field day, kind of out of the studio, out of the arena. You know what I mean? Like just kind of on location type shots. They were very infrequent, so they were very effective because they were kept to once or twice a year or however often. And we did one on location Dudley's shot at a place. The place happened to be called Dudleys. So we saw their sign and we were like, oh, this has to be a bar in Dudleyville. So we ran up there backstairs and did something. And again, I don't know that we had or cared if we had a permit or whatever, but yeah, we tried to do those, I think, infrequently enough that they meant something. And I was about to say that I was never really on any of them to tell you what the size and scope of the crew and the operation would have been like. But there was that kind of Dudley's one when we found that place. But yeah, no, it's, it's New Jack on the subway, and it's probably as real and raw as something like that's going to be.
All right. Well, next up, Joey Styles says that there's going to be a tag match pitting Mike Awesome and Just Incredible against both of their rivals, Jerry Lynn and Masato Tanaka. And Styles says there's going to be more information on the ECW Hardcore Hotline. What do you remember about the Hardcore Hotline? Who was in charge of that back then?
I think that was Joey's project. I think the Hardcore Hotline was either all Joey's or mostly Joey's. And, or maybe to start, it wasn't all his. And then it was something that got kind of, put in his lap as maybe as both a favor. I really couldn't tell you, but I think content wise, it was all or mostly him, and editorial wise, and maybe even on a business level, maybe it was. I think it was a Joey project, but I'm not sure. I don't really remember doing much with the Hardcore Hotline, so I'd be maybe not the best person to ask.
All right, well, here, next up, we're going to cut to just some footage, not a full match, from Worcester, Massachusetts, between Tanaka and Tracy Smothers. And let's just say, before we're going to cover Tracy Smothers more in the future, but is Tracy not the man?
No, Tracy is the man. Rest assured, Tracy Smothers is the man. He is a living legend, and he is somebody who you should, any chance you get to spend a moment with, you should absolutely have him give you some wisdom, tell you a story, advise you. He really is the real deal, and just a true amazing person, and knows this business like the back of his hand.
Yeah, and he's still making shots out there. He's well into his 50s, and he bumps his ass off. If you ever get a chance to see Tracy Smothers in your hometown, you definitely need to go. Masato Tanaka ends up getting the win after scoring that tornado DDT on him on the pair of chairs there, just as he had done against Balls Mahoney. We cut to the announce position where Shane Douglas comments that he'd love to defend the ECW title against Masato Tanaka once he's back in action, and we're really starting to see them build up Masato Tanaka is, kind of a Superman here. He's taken tons of stiff chair shots to the head, which, we know a lot more about CTE these days, but still, and just kind of like hulking up throughout the whole process and no selling a lot of shots to the head and whatnot. So that's a precursor to what's going to come here. Then we see a promo from Taz. Taz mocks Bam Bam Bigelow because he says that he's in Queens, New York, protecting Shane Douglas, even though Taz is in Brooklyn, training for their upcoming match. But he says they're not going to have to wait till Heatwave because Taz is going to show up tonight regardless. He flashes his easy pass at the camera, indicating there's going to going to be there. And yeah, they're not going to have to wait. I mean, is this good shit or what?
Yeah, it is. It's great. From whatever else was going on at the time, we always tried our best to, while we were trying to lead the present of wrestling, while we were trying to become more popular than what was in the mainstream by thinking outside of and beyond. At the same time, we were also, in many respects, we were kind of paying homage to the territory. We're paying homage to some of the stuff that came along before us and just trying to redo it in a way that was current and that was relevant. And man, there are just ways of telling stories that we loved getting compared to Bill Watts. We loved getting compared to world class. And at the same time, though, we loved doing our own thing and creating something where it could be said that, there was nothing like ECW. And, man, I always popped every time we could tell a story differently, because it meant that we didn't have to be lesser than, we didn't have WF light, we didn't have to be the bear. That's what people wanted from us, is to turn on their TV for the hour and see something that a refresh and such a revamp that it wasn't just a kind of shot by shot, word for word, frame by frame, but it was something where, dude, ECW creative was, we did what we could and with what we had. And it's amazing some of the stories that we were able to tell.
Next, we cut to a match in progress. It's an elimination tag match between Just Incredible and Jason against Jerry Lynn and Pablo Marquez. By the time we see the match, Pablo Marquez and Jason have both already been eliminated, leaving Jerry Lynn and Just Incredible as the only two competitors. Jerry Lynn attempts to tombstone Incredible, but Nicole Bass and Chastity, we'll get to both of them a little bit later in the episode, they intervene, allowing Incredible to reverse the move into That's Incredible, his own tombstone. But we don't get to see him deliver the move as we cut back to the announce position where Bam Bam Bigelow and Taz are now brawling it out. We hear the bell sound in the background, but we don't see who wins the match, we don't hear the result, and we don't see who wins the fight going on at the announce position because the feed cuts to static at that point, kind of indicating that Taz and Bam Bam have damaged the equipment there, so it can't run. I mean, this is definitely sort of like, it may not be live, but anything could happen on ECW TV, huh?
Yeah. And also, anything could happen in this Taz and Bigelow story, right? I mean, they're going through the ring. What happens at Heatwave 98, but something similar to that you can compare. And then you've got Taz like, we're not going to end this match, and now there's static, and now there's this. So it's really a very, very chaotic kind of sense of, how are we ever going to know one fall to a positive finish if we ever know who the better man is between Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow when there's just so much calamity and chaos going on this dude.
Yeah, and next up here we cut to Joey Styles talking up Heatwave from the announce booth, but he's interrupted by Taz, who enters the ring and starts cutting a promo. Taz references an ECW TV taping that took place a couple years ago that was delayed by a couple of days because of a massive snowstorm, and when they actually did put on the show, only about 90 people showed up. And he said that those fans who showed up basically said, fuck WWF, fuck WCW, fuck the world. He then references the night that Shane Douglas threw down the NWA heavyweight title, and said that when Shane Douglas did so, he was saying fuck the world. He then says that Shane Douglas isn't a franchise because when he lost the ECW title, he jumped ship and went to the WWF. Taz says that he stuck it out while Douglas was gone, so Taz holds up his own belt and says fuck the world. He then issues an open challenge for the FTW title. Bam Bam Bigelow then hits the ring with an official, and the two immediately begin having a match. After the match goes for a couple of minutes, Taz signals for the Taz mission on Bigelow, but he's stopped by Lance Storm and Chris Candido, forcing a no contest. RVD and Sabu run in there to make the save, and Triple Threat takes a powder. Bill Alfonso tries to shake Taz's hand, seemingly in an attempt to recruit Taz, but Taz refuses, grabs his FTW title, and walks to the back by himself. So we're really solidifying Taz as a loner here as well. Now we have a first in a 3-match series there, 2 out of 3-match series. Tommy Dreamer and Bubba Ray Dudley. Basically, whichever team gets the most wins here will get to pick the stipulation for their match coming up at Heatwave. So we have Tommy Dreamer and Bubba Ray Dudley in the first match. During the match, Dreamer dives over the rope onto Joel Gertner, Sign Guy, and Jeff Jones to stop them from assisting Bubba Ray. What was it like having to catch Tommy Dreamer here?
My God. I don't specifically remember, and probably thank God for that. I'm probably blocking it out because Dreamer is a mass of humanity, like not in a terrible way, but like Dreamer's a big kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, so I probably, gosh, man, I don't know. That's not the kind of thing that happens every day. You know what I mean? Having somebody like Tommy Dreamer fall upon you from that kind of height with that kind of momentum and velocity. I mean, that's not throughout the course of your everyday for a non-wrestler, right? Like I learned how to take the ropes. I learned how to take back bumps, but I mean, I wasn't a fully trained professional wrestler. I was out there to talk, and I was out there, I was in the back to think, and I was just, the physicality of it all is not where my bread was buttered. So to ask what it would feel like or seem like when you've got Dreamer coming at you like that, you just do what your instincts tell you to do and what your wrestling instincts tell you to do, and you just do and you hope for the best, man, because Dreamer's a big boy.
Yeah, Jack Victory runs in and he takes a DDT from Dreamer, but the distraction allows Bubba Ray to hit Dreamer with Victory's guitar, giving the Dudleys the first win in the series. The Sandman then takes on Devon Dudley, and Sandman gets the win with a White Russian leg sweep. They weren't starting to call it that, but it ties up the series at 1-1. And then Spike Dudley versus Big Dick Dudley. Big Dick Dudley wins with a Big Dick driver, giving the Dudleys their pick of the stipulation. We see a backstage promo with Lance Storm and Chris Candido. They're showing off Chris Candido's surgically repaired ear. Storm says that they're going to prove that they're the best tag team in the world in their rematch against RVD and Sabu on this episode. And then we cut to the match in progress. Candido's wearing a protective headgear over his ear. During the match, Lance Storm becomes frustrated with Candido and slaps Candido in the injured ear, allowing Sabu to get the pin over Candido and costing them their shot at reclaiming the tag team titles. We see a post-match promo with RVD, Sabu, and Bill Alfonso stating that they don't know who they'll be defending their titles against at Heatwave, but that it doesn't matter because they'll take on all comers. Then we see a backstage promo against the Dudley boys with Joel Gertner saying that they're not to blame for what they did to Beulah because they're only products of their environment. And that if you're going to blame anyone, it should be Tommy Dreamer for bringing McGillicuddy into ECW. Bubba Ray then says that the worst thing Dreamer could have done was to bring her there to ECW, and it doesn't matter who it is because once they hit the ring, they're in Dudleyville. Bubba Ray concludes that Beulah McGillicuddy's blood is on Tommy Dreamer's hands and proclaims that she will never again get in that ring. So we're really driving it home that Beulah McGillicuddy is gone. We see Tommy Dreamer backstage, and Dreamer says that when you're a professional wrestler, your life is an open book for everyone to read, and they don't just come after you, they come after everyone. But he says that when you're Tommy Dreamer, everybody gets hurt. He blames himself for Beulah's injury. He then breaks down in tears over it, saying that they were supposed to be together forever. And the show goes off the air with Dreamer screaming and beating his forehead into a locker until his head bleeds. We got one last episode of Hardcore TV. It goes on the air on August 1st. Opens with a promo by RVD, Sabu, and Bill Alfonso again, stating that they still don't know who their opponents are at Heatwave, but it doesn't matter because people are going to pay to see RVD defend the world titles anyway. Then Joey Styles makes an announcement that they won't have to wait until Heatwave to find out who their opponents are because they're going to be defending their titles against Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki. So another FMW edition here too, just on this one episode. And then he starts talking up Taz versus Bam Bam Bigelow, and Shane Douglas orders that they play the clip of Bigelow putting Taz through the ring at Living Dangerously yet again. I mean, that gets played a lot leading up to this pay-per-view, where we see Bam Bam Bigelow win the World TV title from Taz. And then we have a promo from Taz. Taz says this isn't about the FTW belt. It's about taking back his victory against Bam Bam Bigelow. And he concludes by saying that at Heatwave, Bam Bam Bigelow is going to tap. Then there's a video package recovering the situation here between Lance Storm and Chris Candido. And afterwards, Shane Douglas cuts a promo on Lance Storm and says that at Heatwave, Chris Candido is going to fry Lance Storm. And this officially sets up the match between the two at Heatwave. Joey Styles also announces that Jerry Lynn and Justin Incredible will face off to conclude their feud, meaning the winner of that is going to be the winner of the feud. Plus, we're going to have Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka one more time. And then he finally officially announces the six-man tag between the Dudley Boys and Tommy Dreamer with Spike Dudley in a Dudleyville street fight. That's the stipulations the Dudley has picked there. Mike Awesome and Just Incredible then have a match against Masato Tanaka and Jerry Lynn. And during the match, Mike Awesome tries to awesome bomb Tanaka through a table to set up at ringside again, but Masato Tanaka escapes this time. And later, Tanaka hits Just Incredible with that tornado DDT onto the two chairs in the ring once again. Mike Awesome makes the save, and Awesome bombs Tanaka from the ring through the table again. Jerry Lynn scores the pinfall here when he reverses That's Incredible with a tombstone. So we're kind of setting up two angles here where, Masato Tanaka and Mike Awesome, they're powerbombing each other through these tables, and Jerry Lynn and Just Incredible, they're both trying to tombstone each other. So there's a lot going on, a lot of storyline here. We return from commercial. We see Joey Styles and Shane Douglas hyping Heatwave. Shane Douglas admits that the production values of previous ECW pay-per-views may not have been that great, but this pay-per-view has it all. Were there any complaints about production values about ECW pay-per-views leading up to now?
Were there complaints about production values?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think anything crazy. I mean, we didn't have the kind of money that the other big two had, but I mean, with what we had, I think we did a good enough job. I think any of the complaints would have been, I don't want to say unmerited, but maybe, nitpicking or, maybe expecting more than, I think everybody realized that when you're getting an ECW product, you were getting something that was going to be absolutely as slickly produced, but as we could. I think fans who really were in the know and real smart fans, I think were well aware of, just kind of, what ECW had to work with and to play with and just kind of what to expect. And I think a lot of them were just looking for, great bell to bell, in between the ropes, in-ring action and great kind of, creativity as far as advancing storylines, just good music, hot chicks, and just, a kind of more adult, realistic flavor. But when it came to actual production, no, I don't think so.
All right. That brings us to the big show, Heatwave, 1998. It goes down on August 2nd from the Hara Arena in Dayton, Ohio. It's a 5,500-seat hockey arena. There's 4,376 in attendance here. Not a bad crowd for ECW. It's the first Heatwave that takes place outside of the ECW arena. I'd say it went over pretty well. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it was the first major Heatwave show in the sense it was the first pay-per-view Heatwave show. It was, I think, something like our 6th pay-per-view overall. So we had only done 5 other big live shows with the truck and everything else like that. But 6 is enough. We were kind of flowing. 1998 was a year where we had a few pay-per-views, and this wasn't the first among them. So like I say, our 6th pay-per-view show, like you said, 4,000 or 5,000 people in the seats, something like 4,400, give or take. Plus we did, I want to say, like a 0.21 pay-per-view, something I think with something on the order of maybe 70,000 buys. If you've got 70,000 people actually paying for it on the cable bill, then figure, if 2 or 3 people is the average watching in each household, because some people are watching in pay-per-view parties of 4 or 5 people. So 2 or 3 to be an average, that gives you about 150, 175,000 people watching at home. So very well received. ECW was starting to prove that it was viable, bringing in nice sized gates at the buildings and for pay-per-view.
Yeah, the dark match here should be mentioned as the hardcore chair swinging freaks, that being Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten. They defeat the F.B.I., Little Guido and Tracy Smothers representing the F.B.I. there. The pay-per-view kicks off with Joey Styles in the ring, who brings out the ECW heavyweight champion Shane Douglas, who's with Francine. How would you describe what Francine is wearing here?
Gosh, she's not wearing a whole heck of a lot, man. She's, I think it's like she's pretty much wearing her panties and wearing a robe over, right?
Yeah, and it's like a see-through robe, and really the only thing that actually covers anything is just the lapel of the robe otherwise. It's something to see. I mean, you should go back and watch this show just for that, I think.
Yeah, a treat, man. Listen, dude, though, I mean, ECW, like I said, you're buying it for that. You're buying it for the action. You're buying it for the story. You're buying it because there's no way of knowing what could possibly happen. So it's to satisfy that kind of element of the unpredictability of it all. There were just so many irons in the fire that made ECW what it was, that honestly, and especially on a show like this, like by the time you're like, you've still got a good 3/4 of the show left, you've already gotten your money's worth.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to further drive home the point that while you can't get away with whatever you want, you could definitely get away with more on pay-per-view than you can on cable. And we'll see that more as we go along here. Shane Douglas says he's excited for the show because Bam Bam Bigelow is going to finally get his hands on Taz again. And then they end it with Francine commenting to Joey Styles that she bets his suit didn't cost as much as these, and then she forces his head into her breasts, which is just fun.
Yeah.
And we see the ECW
yeah,
intro
it's
play
like $6,000.
Yeah, it's got to be, right? Maybe even more. We see the ECW intro play, which is the TV intro with that, Paul Heyman voiceover there with his voice all modulated. I mean, this is pretty iconic stuff for TV. What do you remember about that intro? Who would have put that together, and who would have made the music for it?
Production was done by the guys, man, Ron and Charlie and Paul, and that's really, I mean, in the TNN days when I was there in the studio with Joey, we certainly had, carte blanche to, if we had a good idea, to feel free to chip in and pitch in. But yeah, I mean, it just was what it was. I mean, we didn't have our own TV guy. Ron and Charlie, who happened to be cameramen, also were our production guys. They were the guys who, before ECW, they were like wedding videographers and bar mitzvah videographers and that kind of thing. So they were in that line of work, producing video. And then with us, they learned wrestling. They mastered wrestling as they were doing it week to week. They were our video guys. You know what I mean? We didn't have, VP TV. You know what I mean? We didn't have Kevin Dunn. We didn't have, Keith Mitchell. We didn't have, John Filippelli. You know what I mean? We didn't have a guy that's just there to do TV. We had, our TV guys were our TV guys. They were our camera guys. So there in Ron Buffone's parents' house is where maybe all of that stuff got done. When you're on pay-per-view, you kind of do hire a number of freelancers, and you kind of have, a number more kind of, you have more arms, more legs, more mind. You got your war truck, and you've got a little bit of a larger army. But those guys, those weren't really. There were some freelance guys that were there at pay-per-view that weren't there at weekly TV time. There were one or two of those types, but as far as direction-wise and who would have what montage aired, what the flavor of that montage, what the different clips are, that kind of thing, that was really Paul, Ron, and Charlie.
Our first match here on the pay-per-view is Just Incredible versus Jerry Lynn. Just Incredible comes out with his entourage of Jason, Nicole Bass, and Chastity. And, before this, Chastity she performed in a scene in an adult film called Live Bait. Was anyone backstage at ECW knowledgeable about that, and how did that go over if they were?
Eventually we were. Eventually we were. I don't remember if we knew about it by the time, but conclusively, I can tell you for sure and with certainty that we were indeed. Yes.
I mean, the reason why, I know a lot more, was okay and went by just fine at ECW. But the reason why I ask is just a little bit later in her career in WCW, they're going to fire her whenever they find out about it.
Yeah, well, we watched it.
I
don't want anybody to think that we're more of a dysfunctional family than we could, should, or would have been. But I know that we were aware once it became common knowledge, insofar as like what the name of the film was or whatever, then, somebody went out and procured, yeah, man, I think that one instance of us all kind of watching porn together.
Just one?
Just so that, well, on the record, I don't know, man. I can tell you convincingly
and I mean, we it's out there, so we watched it. You know what I mean? Us not it isn't gonna you know what I mean? Like, it was there to be watched, so we watched it.
Yeah. If you didn't watch it, it wouldn't undo the fact that it was made. Yeah.
You know what? Maybe by the time we watched it, she was in WCW. So maybe this is just us keeping up with the competition, right? Like, just knowing like what the talent on the other program is up to and has done, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it was, right? It wasn't all of us just watching porn with somebody that we knew it wasn't that. Was it?
Like, you didn't invite her, is what you're saying.
I mean, she wasn't there.
Right.
She wasn't there at the time that we watched it.
Yeah.
Well, on its face, porn is
okay, hold on. Just for the record, who would have been there? Yeah, for the record, who would have been there watching this?
Like the whole company.
Okay.
like everybody. Like more people. Like so. I don't remember. I don't want to implicate. Well, like a lot of all of us.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah. So you ordered some pizzas. You got some.
Dude,
beers.
I wasn't.
You popped the
I don't
VHS
think it was.
in.
Listen, I wasn't there. Except listen. For sure, I was there. Like, I was probably in the front row, but I wasn't there. But from I feel you ever see on Saturday Night Live where they're talking about who is it, whichever dictator they're talking about, it's the guy and the girl, and they're like, okay, like, not for nothing, but like sometimes it's like a little bit they do with like Kim Jong-un or whatever. But hey, but long story short, I was there and we watched porn together. It was a bonding experience, and it was we saw it. It happened.
And the roster was stronger for it. Joey Styles says of Nicole Bass, you could call Nicole Bass Russia because she's so much bigger than China. And Nicole Bass is kind of dressed similar to China here in the black top and the black tights there.
Didn't they do it? And I don't remember if it was after. I don't remember the timing wise, but they did it, right? WCW had a performer that they called Asia, right?
Yeah.
So that's along the same lines.
A little bit later. Yeah. I mean, so you would think, would think that this was intentional, like an intentional visual parallel to draw there?
Yes. Fans would bring signs comparing the two, and yes, I absolutely do.
All right. Upon making his entrance here, Joey Styles calls Jerry Lynn the most underrated wrestler in professional wrestling. What do you make of that assessment?
Yeah, that's about spot on. Jerry Lynn, I think, never, even when he was getting recognized the most, even at the height of any of the pushes that he was getting, it was always kind of a lack thereof push. It was always kind of, all else being equal, he could wrestle circles around a lot of his opponents and a lot of the people on any given roster that he was on. And I think a lot of the time he was never really given or never really got the credit he would have deserved. I remember watching Global back in 1990, 91, whenever it was. I was in high school and I'd come home, put on ESPN, and I would watch him and Sean Waltman versus Lightning Kid. And it was just, it was amazing. It was like the American version of it was like getting it was like getting that month's New Japan tape in. And it was no different. I mean, it was really the best of American wrestling at that time. If what you were looking for was the kind of athleticism, and that's definitely, I'm when it comes to my wrestling, I like not only what's going on in between the ropes, but I also like what I hear and what I see, and kind of a lot of the the talk and the story and whatnot. But I mean, for the part of you that's a wrestling fan, for the wrestling itself, and for the combat element, I mean, just Jerry Lynn has always been just so impeccable and just so ahead of his time and at the top of his game. And I think Joey Styles absolutely is correct to say that he never really has gotten enough spotlight for it.
All right, well, let's recap them. By the way, it should be mentioned here, Jerry Lynn and Mikey Whipwreck do have a podcast called Front Row Material that you guys should check out. But let's recap the match here. Jerry Lynn starts out hot, almost getting the win with a couple of near falls. Lynn even dives from the top rope outside onto Just Incredible at one point. Credible smashes a chair into the face of a cornered Jerry Lynn, then powerbombs Jerry Lynn onto the chair. The two brawl outside, where Jason and Nicole Bass assist Just Incredible. Back inside the ring, Lynn delivered a DDT to Credible onto a steel chair, but Chastity helps Credible get his foot on the rope during the pinfall. Lynn then Hurricane Rana's Just Incredible from the top rope, or as Joey Styles would say, Hurricane Rana, and through a table that was set up outside the ring. When Credible's entourage tries to intervene again, Jerry Lynn fends off Jason with a Tiger Bomb, Nicole Bass with a low blow, and then Chastity with a tombstone of his own. Jerry Lynn then attempts a Hurricane Rana from the top rope onto Just Incredible, but Credible counters with a low blow and delivers That's Incredible from the second rope to score the pinfall. Bell to bell, the match goes for 14 minutes and 37 seconds. Meltzer gives it a 3 1/4 star rating. What was your take on the match?
I thought it was amazing. I watched the show the other day in preparation for this, and I thought it was really good. Back and forth story that they were telling. I really liked it.
All right, next up we have Lance Storm versus Chris Candido, and as a surprise, Chris Candido comes out with Tammy Lynn Sytch, formerly Sunny of the WWF, and what's important to note here is that Sytch has just been released by the WWF just 4 days prior to this. When did you first hear about Tammy Lynn Sytch coming into the company, and what was the general impression there?
I don't remember. Would have been a surprise to me seeing her that day. If the release was 4 days before, if they really did release her on, like, let's say Wednesday, then it was probably after the previous week's TV. I wasn't yet in production once a week because we weren't in the TNN days yet. So if it was the Wednesday before the pay-per-view, I may not have known until I got to the building. But we expect great things, I'm sure, just because, every time somebody would emigrate and come to us from the WWF or from WCW, we always hoped that it would benefit us.
Yes, it was reported here that she was let go because the WWE gave her an ultimatum. They told her she either had to go to rehab or she'd be fired. And then she did go to rehab, but then she refused treatment, claiming that she didn't have a problem. And then she stopped responding to WWE's attempts to reach her, so they let her go. So that's why I was asking about what the impression was of her, coming into the company, just based off of that. Meltzer would comment that it looked like she hadn't slept in days. I don't know if I would have picked up on that, but he seemed to notice that. And Candido's still wearing the protective headgear over his ear, which legitimately was injured. Early in the match, Lance Storm removes the headgear, of course, pulling the heel thing. He exposes that injured ear. Lance Storm escaped a surfboard stretch by Candido with a dropkick. Sytch then tripped up Storm to give Candido the advantage. Storm hits a super kick. Candido counters with a neckbreaker. Storm then suplexed Candido to the outside from the apron, following it up with a springboard plunge onto Candido. Next, Storm superplexed Candido, then executed a flying, spinning heel kick. Storm tried to dive onto Candido from the apron, but Candido caught him, delivering a power slam. Candido then tried to throw powder in the eyes of Storm, but Storm shoved a handful of powder into Candido's own face. So Sytch makes the save by crotching Lance Storm on the ropes. That sets up Chris Candido to execute a blonde bombshell from the top rope. He picks up the 3 count, goes for 11 minutes and 1 second. Dave Meltzer gives it a 3 1/4 star rating there. Lots of action here, lots of story going on. What was your take?
Yeah, another great match. I thought those two were really, really smooth. I thought they worked well together. They're pros. Dude, try to find a match of Lance Storm's that isn't any good. Try to find a match of Chris Candido's that isn't any good. You're not going to succeed. They're both, they can work with broomsticks. So being in there to work with the other guy is just, the icing on the cake, man, and a blessing. And I thought they really did get as much out of the other as anybody else could have. I thought it was a really, really well put together match. And I thought, this is like, like I said before, a couple of matches into a show like this, and you feel like you've already gotten your money's worth. And I think you've got the Just Incredible Jerry Lynn match. You've got this match. Plus you've got all the other shenanigans going on between and before those two matches. At the time, that's really, you know what I mean? I mean, people had spent the same amount of money on pay-per-views where the whole pay-per-view goes by and you don't have as much action as you've had in both those matches. So, we were always into trying to give our fans their money's worth in the first hour and a half, just alleviate the fact nobody's looking for a refund, nobody's looking to make a complaint, but everybody still thinks ECW is the best out there. And we were looking to make that happen real early and never let it be a question, even if we have a wonky production moment, even if there's a glitch, even if something, we always wanted to get out of the gate hot and solidify as soon as possible. Your money's worth has been gotten. We've already given you as much of a show as you could expect from the others, so that everything after that's gravy.
Yeah, and I'm just a fan. I don't know anything about anything. But to me, ECW was a lot about fan service, and I think breaking up that tag team and pitting them against each other was a great way to deliver on that. Next up, we see some footage that was taken earlier in the day. New Jack is outside of the arena with fans all around him. He's cutting a promo on Jack Victory. New Jack says that Victory is going to get his ass tore up, and then Victory shows up. The two of them are about to brawl, but then Bubba and Devon and Big Dick Dudley suddenly show up in a car. They just pull right up, and they start to jump New Jack. But then Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten then run in to make the save before the video ends. This is really good shit. One thing I have to comment on, though, is that it's clear that the company's getting away with, having cursing on the air here pretty early on. I think in the opening promo, Shane Douglas drops an F-bomb or something like that. But in this pre-tape package, for some reason, there's a lot of the cussing is edited out, except for the fact in the background, Jack Victory is beating down New Jack, and he's just screaming, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you," over again. Clear as day, but it's not edited out. What would you think would be the reasoning behind trying to at least somewhat edit this package?
That could have been for any number of reasons. So I'm not sure the exact reason in this case why some of the cursing is in there and some of it isn't. Sometimes that's done depending on kind of the way the scatter shot of it is. Sometimes that's done for a reason. It's done for accentuation of what is there, or it's done not there. There could very well have been a production psychology method to the madness of why that piece was edited the way it was. Because I wasn't privy to it, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Back in the announce position, Joey Styles explains that due to the events we saw in that video, the scheduled match between New Jack and Jack Victory has been canceled. Would you know, was this all storyline, or was there a legitimate reason why that match didn't go down on the pay-per-view?
Now, I don't know if one of the guys was hurt, but if they were, or really even if they weren't, again, I'm not privy, but I was just talking production psychology. And then also before that, remember I was talking about how ECW wanted to make sure that they gave the first match or two enough so that you meaning wanting a refund, not thinking you got your money's worth. And I used my word when I said that, because when this happens, psychologically, what you've got from a psychological perspective, and this goes back to me talking about whatever it is that has to be presented, whether anymore, whatever it is, you always the most effective portrayal. In this case, there Dudleyville street fight. There was supposed to be the big main event at the end of the show, the 6-man, which was a Dudleyville brawl, a Dudley's brawl. There was also, though, supposed to be a New Jack style brawl. There was a Jack and a Jack Victory, New Jack brawling with each other. There was supposed to be that kind of match on the show as well. Similar, but different, whatever, to the Dudleys match in the main event. What the Dudleys have done by attacking New Jack is they have taken away, and being a heel, they've taken the other brawling match that they were not in, the one that New Jack was, right? They're in the main pay-per-view, but they don't even believe that New Jack should be on the pay-per-view. So they've taken the brawling match and the opportunity to see New Jack wrestle. They've taken that away from the fans. It's this show's version of them saying that they have Terry Funk hit the music. No music, no Terry Funk. So it kind of goes back to that. Was it done because one of those guys really wasn't able to a convincing brawl style match? I can't remember. I can't remember what the rash in that match. It could have been that one or both of the guys was injured, but it could have also just been the show being up to the gills and it being written into the show that brawl was never actually supposed to happen. It was supposed, but then it kind of be missed when the Dudleys took it away.
All right, next we cut to a backstage segment where we see Bill Alfonso with RVD and Sabu. Alfonso says it doesn't matter who their opponents are because they're going to be losers. And then RVD states that they're on top because of RVD. That sets off Sabu. You see him get irritated there. RVD then continues to heap it on, calling himself the whole fucking show. And we see RVD and Sabu tussle over, the ECW TV title and the tag titles as well. So we see that uneasiness between all of them here. Next up, we have Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka. Awesome dominates early on with a diving elbow drop, a belly-to-belly suplex, and a diving shoulder block. Awesome then does a suicide dive over the top rope onto Masato Tanaka. Tanaka at one point sets Awesome up against the ropes and runs down the ramp and nails Awesome with a chair. Pretty reminiscent of Great Muta versus Hulk Hogan there. Of course, Masato Tanaka has done some similar stuff like this before. And this being, I should mention, this is the ramp style that leads all the way up to the ring there, so it's level with the bottom of the ring with the apron there. They brawl outside for a beat, and Awesome even dives over the top rope and into the crowd onto Tanaka. Returning to the ring, Mike Awesome would deliver an Awesome bomb followed by an Awesome splash, but he only gets a 2 count. Awesome then hit Tanaka over the head with a chair several times and executed another Awesome bomb. Awesome set up the table outside and dived onto Tanaka from the top rope with a steel chair. Awesome tried to Awesome bomb Tanaka yet again, this time through the table he'd set up again just like he had before, but Masato Tanaka escaped, and instead Awesome bombed Mike Awesome over the top rope to the table himself. I mean, this ends up being a pretty iconic spot. It gets played in a lot of ECW commercials there for years to come. Tanaka then struck Awesome with a roaring elbow, followed through with that tornado DDT onto the pair of steel chairs, getting Tanaka the win via pinfall. It goes for 11 minutes and 50 seconds. Meltzer pretty much gives this 4 stars, stating it's the match of the night more or less. Joel, what was your take on this match?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I thought it was different from the other matches on the show, and that's what it was intended to be. Like I said, that we loaded it up so much that, you want to make sure that it's not the kind of thing that you can't ever live up to again. But you also want to make sure that if you have a show with all of these great matches, all of these matches that are going to be, for lack of a better way to describe them, 3-star or better matches. They're going to, all of the talent's going to perform. All of the matches are going to fire on all cylinders. So then at that point, when you have not just a bunch of matches, when you have just a bunch of matches, they've all got to be different. And that some of them are going to be better than others. When you have a bunch of matches that are all going to be good, all going to be great, you really have to make sure that there's difference among them, and you really have to make sure that some of them are unique. And that, I think, is what this was brought in from Japan to do, is to be a match that could be counted on to not only come across well, but to also be perceived differently from the other matches. And man, great match, definitely different than Candido versus Storm, definitely different than Jerry Lynn versus Just Incredible. A really, really great match. A scientific brawl. A brawl with wrestling maneuvers. So not a Dudley Boys match, not like we were talking about before, a New Jack match, but still a stiff, violent contest.
When the brawl goes out into the crowd like this, it happened a lot in ECW. Was there ever any concern or any conversations with the talent about, hey, man, be careful out there with the fans, or was this just giving the fans their money's worth?
I mean, there's always a little of, hey, let's not get sued. But,
yeah.
Once you get sued, it doesn't matter how many people you gave how much of their money's worth, because you're going to give it all back in a lawsuit. So, I mean, we never wanted to hurt anybody, and we never wanted to get sued. But beyond that, it was go do your damnedest.
Next up, we have Taz cutting a promo here for his match coming up with Bam Bam Bigelow. He claims that Bigelow is going to tap out yet again. And he says that the FTW title is the only championship that means anything in the business, and that he's going to avenge his loss to Bam Bam Bigelow at Living Dangerously back in March. We cut back to the announce position where Shane Douglas calls out Taz by stating that the ECW World title is the only real championship in ECW, not the FTW title. This is followed by a pre-taped Dudley Boys promo for their main event against Tommy Dreamer, Sandman, and Spike Dudley. Joel Gertner, say that the odds are stacked in the Dudleys' favor. Bubba Ray then says that Dreamer will be crucified for the sins of Beulah McGillicuddy, and he ends with, "You can give your souls to Jesus, but your ass belongs to the Dudleys. Pretty great stuff here. Bubba Ray Dudley, should be mentioned, is wearing a Confederate flag bandana here. It doesn't really age well. I have a feeling we're going to be saying doesn't really age well a lot on this program, though.
Yeah, I mean, Bubba was Southern, right? At one point when he first started out, when he, at the beginning of his character's journey in ECW, Bubba was a Southern stutterer. A vast patch of Dudleyville there's kind of, how they say about Pennsylvania that there's like Philly and there's Pittsburgh and everything in between is Alabama.
Yeah, I have heard that. And I can actually attest to that, too.
You've heard that?
Yeah.
So, like Dudleyville, so there's Dudleyville.
Yeah.
There's Dudleyville.
Right.
And then everything in between Dudleyville and Dudleyville, for lack of a better term, is Dudleyville. So Bubba, before he was ever from metropolitan Dudleyville, because that's, I think, with, the ECW money, I think that started to get into his bank account and started to get into his head, and he was eventually not so much a stutterer. You can't have somebody be from the south side of somewhere and then have somebody else be from south somewhere. It kind of kills it. So Devon was from the south side of Dudleyville, was, hobnobbing and became, a kind of a Dudleyville kind of city kid and whatever else. He wound up being from metropolitan Dudleyville. At times he was from what the Sportatorium's address, I think 1000 South Industrial in Dallas. He was from that. That was his address once in Dudleyville. But he didn't like it. And eventually, and he didn't want people knowing his business and where he lived. So eventually he moved to metropolitan Dudleyville, which is where he was from. But yeah, lest we forget, when he started out 2.5 years earlier, in late 95, maybe closer to 3 years, maybe earlier, in late 95, as a Dudley in ECW, he was indeed very Southern, hence the name Bubba Ray, which is a, not to like generalize, right? Like not to stereotype, but Bubba Ray's a bit of a Southern sounding name. And a stutterer, so he had the Southern eye. But yeah, man, the Confederate flag, he, I guess, was a vestige, right? Was a remnant, was a relic, was a throwback to his days when he was kind of from that part of Dudleyville that's just that rural kind of country, like in between like Dudleyville City, Dudleyville. There's just Dudleyville. And somewhere in the southern part of that, not quite as far south as the south side of Dudleyville, or maybe further south. It gets confusing.
Okay, well,
I mean, you can, I mean, it's ridiculous. You can stop me. Stop.
No. Look, this show has your name on it. It doesn't have my name on it.
I mean, I hate to say ridiculous because 100, it's a shoot, man. Dudleyville's a shoot. Have you ever been to Dudleyville?
No, I can't. Well, I might have passed through it and just not known, but as far as I know, I've never been. Where is Dudleyville?
Well, there are no signs.
Right.
What?
Where is Dudleyville? Could you clear that up for me? Do you know where it is?
Well, again, somewhere between Dudleyville and Dudleyville.
I think what you're trying to say is Dudleyville exists in all of our hearts, right?
Let's go with that.
Yeah. Next up, we have the ECW World Tag Team Championship match. RVD and Sabu with Bill Alfonso. They take on Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki, or as WWF fans at the time would have known him as Hakushi. Both teams fight back and forth.
Did we just do 3 minutes on the geography of Dudleyville?
I think we did. It might have been more than 3 minutes, to be honest with you. That could be an episode in itself, I think.
It felt like... And they said Seinfeld was a show about nothing, right?
Well, this ain't Seinfeld. Yeah, you see what I did?
It ain't Seinfeld. 100 points for you, my friend.
All right. We see both these teams fight back and forth, trading the advantage over one another. Sabu and Hayabusa, they pull out the more acrobatic moves. We see Sabu execute an Arabian press onto Hayabusa. Sabu then applied the camel clutch onto Hayabusa. RVD dropkicked Hayabusa, and Shinzaki, that's a tough name, man, responded with a springboard dropkick to RVD.
Sabu was written about very highly with great reverence in the Arabian press. Did you know that?
No. I'm sure he got a lot of coverage from the Arabian press.
Right.
Yeah. A baseball slide from Hayabusa sent Sabu to the outside, and Hayabusa followed up with an acai moonsault to the outside. The match then crossed over the guardrail and spilled into the audience with Sabu leaping out of the ring onto both of his opponents. Hayabusa landed a Firebird splash on RVD. RVD and Sabu then make a comeback by hitting their opponents with Rolling Thunder. Sabu applied a Boston Crab onto Shinsei, while RVD and Shinzaki... I'll call him Shinsei, it's Jinsei, excuse me. While RVD hit Shinzaki with a diving leg drop for a near fall. A table was then set up in the ring. RVD hit both opponents with Van Daminators, allowing the champions to lay Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki out onto the table. RVD and Sabu then left from opposing corners, driving their opponents through the table with their leg drops. RVD covers Hayabusa, but Sabu pushes RVD off and picks up the 3 count himself. The match goes for 20 minutes and 52 seconds. Dave Meltzer only gives it 2 stars. And admittedly, this isn't a wrestling clinic, but it was a fun match.
Yeah, no, it was a fun match. I agree with you. I think it was. I liked it. I mean, it's a good match with a lot of other great matches, and I thought a lot of the intricacies. I thought the way Rob Van Dam during the match and at the beginning he started out and everything. I think a lot of what was done was really good. If you're looking for it. It just like you said, it from on that night, it may not have from the purest wrestling standpoint. If somebody were to say that they liked one better, I don't think, then that's fine. But the match definitely not only served its purpose in advancing RVD and Sabu, but it gave fans a chance to see great tag match with some great talent. Hayabusa didn't States much, if not for this. I mean, this was probably the first time and maybe the only time that Hayabusa performed on this level in the States, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's worth mentioning, too, that with his gear, with the parachute-style pants and the sash and the long hair, I mean, he makes a pretty good foreign foil to Sabu as well. It's pretty much a natural fit.
Absolutely.
Next up, we see a video package.
And then also too, you get Jinsei Shinzaki in the match, who just like Tammy is a WWF alum. He's a former WWF name. He's Hakushi, so he's a guy who, for any of the fans in Dayton who were talked into going to the show, let's say by they had only ever gone to WWF or WCW shows at the Hara Arena TV tapings. And they were told, give this ECW a chance. Who might I see there? Well, a guy like Hakushi comes out, and he's just so much a pro and so seasoned and so recognizable and so iconic that, it's just also an opportunity to get somebody like him who, like we were talking about before, thanks to the FMW talent agreement, you get to see somebody like a Jinsei Shinzaki who, you otherwise might not see on an indie show that comes to town. An indie promoter is not going to fly somebody in like that from Japan. So aside from WWF or WCW, if you want to see somebody like Hakushi, like Shinzaki, it's ECW is where you're going to see him.
Next up, we see a video package narrated by Paul Heyman recapping the feud between Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow, setting us up for the next match there. What was the thinking here? Why was Paul Heyman narrating these instead of it being Joey Styles?
That's an editorial decision. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be one to answer that. You'd have to ask Paul. I think sometimes certain storylines needed to be advanced with either a level of, I wouldn't say it has to do with Joey and his being unbiased. I think it's more sometimes something needs the kind of gravitas where the fact that it is Paul makes you stand back and take notice. It could have been something along those lines, but I wouldn't know.
All right, well, now it's time for the FTW Championship match. It's announced that this is going to be an ECW death match where falls count anywhere in the building. We've got Taz defending the FTW Championship against Bam Bam Bigelow. Bigelow executed a powerbomb onto Taz early, but Taz rose right back up, and the two brawled out into the audience. Back inside the ring, Bam Bam Bigelow hit Taz with another powerbomb, then drove Taz through a table. Taz has got some color at this point here. Bam Bam set up the broken table in the corner and tried to drive Taz through it again, but Taz countered and T-boned Taz plexed Bigelow through that table instead. They brawled out into the aisle where Bigelow attempted to throw Taz into the crowd with a T-bone suplex, but Taz countered that with a tornado DDT that put both of them through the ramp. It should be noted here that, well, for one thing, this is a very iconic spot, but it's reported by Dave Meltzer that Mikey Whipwreck spent hours before the show gimmicking the ramp for that spot. Why would that responsibility have fallen to Mikey Whipwreck, and do you know anything about that process?
Well, Mikey Whipwreck was very familiar with the ECW ring going back all the way to the beginning a few years earlier when he started in the company, when he was kind of a student at the gym and setting up rings. So, I mean, Mikey would have all that knowledge and would really be the best one to, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that it was Mikey that was in charge of it. For the logistics and for the details on it, you'd want to ask Mikey or you'd want to ask Taz, but yeah, not surprising at all.
Bigelow then crawls out of the wreckage first. He starts to walk back to the ring, but then Taz leapt up out of the hole left in the ramp there, grabbed Bam Bam Bigelow from behind and applied the Taz mission that forced Bigelow to tap out. It goes for 13 minutes and 20 seconds. Dave Meltzer gives it 3 3/4 stars. And then an enraged Shane Douglas screams that Bigelow wasn't tapping, he was reaching for the ropes. And Taz stands up in the corner, grabs a microphone, and says to Douglas, "Beat me if you can, survive if I let you." Douglas then throws his monitor onto the floor and storms off with Francine in tow, leaving Joey Styles all alone at the announce table. This was a pretty damn good match.
Hey, there's production values. We destroyed a working monitor. Take that. And yeah, man, and look what happened. Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow. And look, more commotion, more confusion, more calamity, more chaos ensuing. Because look, we've got a finish. It's a non-finish. We don't know. Maybe just because Shane's the heel doesn't make Taz the babyface. Just because Shane's the heel doesn't make him wrong. Just because you're crazy doesn't mean the whole world might not be against you. And just because Bam Bam Bigelow got called by the ref for tapping doesn't mean that maybe he wasn't just reaching for the ropes in this case, the same way Taz got beat by going through. I mean, it's just more levels and intricate layers of mystery wrapped around this program where you can watch these guys battle for 15, 20, 25 minutes. And at the end of the day, who's better, Bam Bam Bigelow or Taz? And what that does for a wrestling company is it keeps a top program like this. And every time a match happens and a finish happens and a result happens, instead of it sucking oxygen away from the program and making it more depleted now to where it shrinks and shrinks, it's not there anymore, and then you have to move on to the next one. What finishes like these did instead was give the program life, give the program oxygen and meaning, and give the fans a reason to want next time to pay once again to see Taz take on Bam Bam Bigelow.
All right, now it's time for the main event. We've got the Dudleyville Street Fight. Tommy Dreamer, the Sandman, and Little Spike Dudley versus Bubba Ray, Devon, and Big Dick Dudley. Joey Styles says as the Dudleys are making their entrance there, while he's supposed to remain impartial, that the Dudleys are scumbags. Bubba Ray gets on the mic and challenges everybody in both the WWF and WCW before challenging all the fans. Joel, did you ever fear for your safety in there in the ring while Bubba Ray had a microphone?
I get asked that about, if I don't get asked it once a week, I get asked it twice a week. I get asked it dozens and dozens and dozens of times a year. And many times, more often than not, right? Like 50% or more. It's not generally, did I have that fear? But it's in relation to this building, Dayton, Ohio, whether it's Heatwave 98 or Heatwave 99. It's always, did you fear for your life? Did you think there was going to be a riot? The truth of the matter is no, because our first line of defense was all you needed, and that was Atlas security. If a fan could get past Atlas, then they might as well have brought a gun to the building, because God bless them. And then when you get past Atlas, which isn't happening, then, I mean, I'm standing there next to Bubba and Devon and Big Dick. And if it's to protect us, Big Dick will kill a guy. You know? And we all knew, we didn't question that. You know what I mean? Like, when it's his family that's, you know, being attacked, like if it's justifiable, like Big Dick will put somebody in the ground. So, I mean, how scared are you supposed to be, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that he would, because as a fan myself, as a mark, I would definitely believe that he could. He might. Yeah,
he might. Mm-hmm.
They hand the microphone over to you, Joel. You introduce everybody there. Extreme official Jeff Jones, he still has the blow up doll of Beulah McGillicuddy. Sign guy Dudley, he's got the cast on his leg still. What was that injury, or what were the list of injuries? Do you remember that you announced that he had?
Sign guy had a torn meniscus. No, something with the leg maybe, and then a torn patella tendon, and then a ruptured rectum, which I was then corrected, and it was actually a deviated septum. Yeah, man, rough shape. Sign guy had been through the ringer.
It's a pretty funny introduction. I think everybody should go back and listen to it. And you kind of did something similar to it leading up to the pay-per-view on one of the ECW hardcore TVs as well. It's pretty good stuff, man. Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, and Spike, they all come out holding ladders and drinking beers. Goes on for a while there. And could anybody in professional wrestling since then or even now make an entrance like the Sandman?
Maybe. I mean, but not. When you say like, I mean, there's similar to. It depends how you measure. I mean, really, no. Really, for effect, no. I mean, the building, like, honestly, you don't need the match after a Sandman intro. Like, you just, if what you're experiencing during a wrestling match and why you go to wrestling is for the, like, you're watching it and you're like, you're on the roller coaster and there's this catharsis and there's, you know what I mean? Like, if it's all the ups and downs and the kind of soul searching and the kind of, like, if like, dude, you get a lot of that just from the, like, there's such an electricity and a vibe from Sandman's intro. It really is such a goose pimple. Just like, it really is hard to describe. Like, if you were never in the building for ECW and you didn't feel ECW, it was really, I mean, it was amazing. It was, a lot of the time, it was more like being at a concert than being at a wrestling match. It was pretty cool. But I don't know if anybody could, I mean, he's smoking a cigarette, he's drinking 4 beers, and he's getting himself cut open before the match even starts. It was our pyro, man. We didn't have pyro, so a Sandman entrance did what pyro did.
Yeah, and I say that because just a couple years ago, I was at an independent show. It was in a bar. Sandman was there. He shows up. He does his entrance. He chugs a couple beers, just does a few moves in the ring, and then he leaves. And the fans just ate it up, myself included, man. It was awesome. I mean, that's all you really needed. Like you said, you don't even need the match. Sandman does his entrance and everybody's happy.
Yeah, and the building's happy. Beer sales are going through the roof. Everybody's getting a beer or two in each hand, for when Sandman comes out. And then after he drinks them, another beer or two is getting bought. And it's like, dude, it amped up Sandman, to be sure. It amped up the boys. It amped up the fans. It drove up beer sales. It just, again, it was just, ECW was electric in and of itself. It was electric, period. But I think nothing really could be said that it could have been counted on religiously night after night, like Mickey Mouse walking down Main Street, depended on to bring the vibe at an ECW show the way Sandman's entrance did.
Both teams start off the match by brawling it out. They're exchanging momentum here. Bubba Ray attempts a Bubba Bomb on Spike, which Spike reverses with a Hurricane Rana. Sandman then nails Bubba Ray with a beer can. At one point, Sandman sets up a ladder in the ring, and then Spike Dudley climbs to the top of the ladder and jumps out of the ring onto all 3 of his opponents, just kind of taking one of those amazing bumps that Spike Dudley was known to do. Sign guy Dudley tries to intervene, but he gets put in the figure 4 by Tommy Dreamer. Jeff Jones then runs into the ring, and pile drives the blow-up doll he's been carrying and mocks Tommy Dreamer until Dreamer grabs Jones and delivers a pile driver of his own. Joel Gertner, you then get into the ring, but you get hung up in a tree of woe. Sandman, Dreamer, and Spike then hit all of their opponents with basement drop kicks. They're all in trees of woe as well. And you get hit by the official with a basement drop kick yourself because you'd been cutting him down there before the match.
Yeah, I've been making fun of Masato for a while by this point.
Well,
listen, the dude's bald. I said he was bald. You know what I mean?
Right, that's true. I mean, you're just saying the obvious, but, he didn't take too kindly to it. Both the teams continue to battle back and forth using weapons. Big Dick Dudley puts Dreamer on a ladder. Spike Dudley attempts to hit Big Dick Dudley with an acid drop, but Big Dick countered by throwing Spike through a table that was placed outside the ring yet again. Sandman took out Big Dick Dudley with a Singapore cane to the head. Sandman then attempted to do the same to Bubba Ray, but Bubba Ray countered by hitting Sandman with a chair. Bubba Ray then attempted a diving splash onto Dreamer, who was still on the ladder, but Dreamer moved, allowing him to execute a Dreamer DDT onto Bubba Ray Dudley, down onto that same ladder, which allowed Dreamer to get the pinfall and the win. The match goes for 14 minutes and 29 seconds. Smelter didn't love it. He gives it 2.25 stars. Still, a lot of fun. Still sent the fan zone happy, though.
Yeah, I think Dudleyville Street Fight, that's exactly what it was intended to be. And so that's exactly what it was. And absolutely, man, I thought it was a great time.
After the match, Jack Victory blindsides Tommy Dreamer with a guitar shot. This brought out New Jack, who hurls a shopping cart full of weapons into the ring, and the babyfaces clean house. As the babyfaces celebrate in the ring, Tommy Dreamer grabs a microphone and declares that Dayton, Ohio is ECW country before the show fades to black. And there you have it. ECW Heatwave, 1998. Pretty great show, Joel. What do you think of the whole thing after watching it back?
Dayton, Ohio. Amazing where people can live these days. I thought it was great, dude. I thought it was really fun. It was really a good show. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was a good show. It was a great show in a lot of ways. And yeah, it was, for many people, they believe that that's when ECW was in its prime. It was mid-98. Some people think it was before or after that, but it's hard to, it's hard to take away from the people that say that this was ECW's best show. There's a lot of legs to stand on that they're right. For people who say that it was their favorite show, I can't say I see why not. For people who say that 98 and this was our peak to them, then that's what they believe, and with good reason. Who knows, man? I mean, it was a great way. I mean, our WrestleMania was November to Remember. It was in New Orleans. We're going to wind up doing an episode on it one of these days. And man, I mean, this was not our WrestleMania. This was not our November to Remember. It was Heatwave. And it was the first Heatwave that was brought from being, like a major once a year, some years yes, some years no, ECW arena show to being on a national and pay-per-view and international level. It was the first of the three that was brought to that level, and it had the international talent. It had the big fight feel. It had the big venue atmosphere of the 5,000-seat Hara Arena, a building that had been known to be a WWF and WCW TV building. So, yeah, man, I thought it was a great show and a great way to lead us into November to Remember of 98.
All right, guys, there you have it, but let's not stop it there, guys. Let's get ready.